straight from the mayor's mouth, with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.
Hello everyone and welcome to Straight from the Mayor's Mouth. Hello there, Matt, how are you?
Well, good, and I hope I'm still good as this goes to air, because as this goes to air, I'll be hopefully somewhere around Mandurah and Dunedoo on my motorbike, not my motorbike actually.
Of course, you're doing the Black Dog Ride, aren't you,
Black
today?
Dog Ride, yeah.
Yes.
So, and I need to give a quick little shout out to Work, Rest, Play here. Very generous. They did the same last year. They lent me a motorbike, lent me a bit of gear that I might have needed to go along with that, and they're very good. They take basically almost a brand new bike or one of their demo bikes and say, here you go and participate. We know it's a great cause, Black Dog Ride, so go and participate and please bring it back in one piece, and for their sake and their motorbike's sake.
For both your sakes.
And
absolutely.
my sake.
That's right, yeah. Have a safe ride, as they say.
Hopefully, as I'm riding along now, as people listening to this, hopefully I'm riding safely and I get back to Dubbo and everything's okay. But it is a great cause, Black Dog Ride, and they do some great work. And the numbers are incredible. Obviously, as we record this, I don't know the numbers that they're going to be on Sunday, but if I base it on last year, hundreds of people there. And it's actually quite nice. I catch up with people that I haven't seen for a long time. I used to race motorbikes as a kid, and so some people I haven't continued on riding motorbikes my whole life constantly, but every now and again I'll get involved with it again, and so I see some people that I know from the past in motorbikes. So it's good to catch up with a few people.
Isn't it lovely to sort of be able to do something that you enjoy, but then sort of mix it then with a really good cause as well?
Well, it's not something I'd normally go and do. I would normally jump on a motorbike and ride to Dunedoo. But again, with a good cause.
When you get the chance, it's a great chance, isn't
it? It is, yeah.
Oh, well done, mate. Well, all the very best, and may I say, have a safe ride as well.
Thank you.
All right, let's jump straight in it. What a week. What a brilliant week here in Dubbo. Let's sort of go back a little bit. Started off, I think, with the Golf New South Wales, the regional qualifier for the Women's New South Wales Open. That took place, and that was going all week. And, of course, to correspond with that and sort of running at the same time, we had the Bowls New South Wales State Championships. That launched there last Tuesday. It was the first week. Of course, this week coming up, there's another week. Just a hive of activity again here in Dubbo.
It is, and those sort of events are just, I'd almost call them our bread and butter now. So I'll run through those two with a bit more detail. So Bowls New South Wales State Championships, you're right, 7 a.m. Tuesday. I got to roll the first bowl, not actually part of the competition, but
I saw a video of you. You had a bit of style.
Well,
you had a bit of style.
They did say that.
I was sitting there thinking, okay, this could end really bad. Oh, actually, no. When you turn 75 and 80,
I should be right.
You should be right to go. You got the skill.
Well, some of the guys there were surprised because I've never done any bowls apart from a Christmas party type bowls.
Yeah.
But I actually think it's quite a good sport, and I think the idea that there are so many different ages can play it together, and so many different people with different abilities can play it together. So that's fantastic.
I will retract my 75 80 because I actually used to play a bit of bowls myself, and I was a much younger man than 75.
So there were 880 competitors here. So sorry, it started on Tuesday, the 12th of March. It goes through till the 27th of March. So a huge event. 880 competitors over that time. Now,
they split it up over like different. You couldn't have everyone sort of playing for 2 weeks.
They're using 3 bowling clubs in Dubbo, so that's a really important part of it. So 880 competitors are here, but not all at the same time. So there's different categories, so people come in and out, but still fantastic over that length of time. Now, this is the first time ever they've taken the state championships outside a metro area.
How good's that?
Fantastic. And Dubbo was chosen for that. They did look at different locations, but certainly a few things that happened. And I've got to give a quick shout out to Tony Spears from Club Dubbo. He's the chairman over there. Yep. They started an event a couple of years ago, which was the richest bowls tournament in the Southern Hemisphere. And they did that, and they got people that were world champions, people that have represented Australia. People came along to that event because it was a rich bowls event. But when Bowls New South Wales, and I did talk to Tim Rowe, the CEO of Bowls New South Wales, about this, when they saw the ability for a club in Dubbo, in a regional location, to host an event like that, they went, oh, hold on, maybe we should think about this differently. And I met the chairman of the board of Bowls New South Wales, Dillis was her name.
Right.
And she talked about the fact that the board said, bowls is played across the state. We need to get out there more often. So it was a bit of a board push. It was a bit of a push from the CEO.
I love the outward thinking of the lady. Well done.
Yeah,
well done.
That's right. But it was also a bit of the ability to show that we could do that. So a joint effort. And then when they approached council, they needed a lot of money from council to host this event. And the first reaction from our staff and certainly from councillors was, we just don't have the budget for that amount. And I said, but it's too important an event. So I actually got the 3 chairmen of the 3 bowls clubs. So you've got the Macquarie Club, you've got the RSL Club, and you've got Club Dubbo. And I got those 3 on a teleconference call, and I actually remember it because I was in a taxi in Sydney going to a meeting in Sydney.
Is that right? Okay.
And I'm on a teleconference call with those 3, and I said, we need this amount of money. We just haven't got the budget to do it, but we want it for Dubbo. But the 3 clubs are going to get a benefit financially. Council won't get any financial benefit, but good for the community. I need the 3 of you to put in some money to help council do this. And the pause was negligible. They all said, yep, we're in. We think it's worthwhile. We'll do it. So the collaboration of those 3 clubs, working with Bowls New South Wales and our events team. So any one of those bits could have fallen over and it wouldn't have happened. So it worked well. Now, we've got that contract for 24, 2026 and 2028. In the intervening years, they'll take it somewhere else, which I'm quite fine with. I'm quite happy with that. I think share it around. That's not a problem at all. So that's a great event. But so first time ever outside Metro, but they've also got they've got a multi-disability, or they often call it the para event. And they host that as a state championships, but normally it's separate to the Bowls New South Wales State Championships. So it's still a state championships.
But this is running at the same time, is it? Or?
This is the first time ever that they've actually combined the two. And I went to a dinner during the week for they call it the para dinner. So I went to a dinner there, and again, they were pretty excited about the fact, first time ever, they're included. And it was quite nice. Tim Rowe, I got up and welcomed people to Dubbo and do the normal things that I would do in an event like that. But Tim Rowe got up and spoke about the bowls process, but also then invited a few people up to talk about their experience either getting into bowls or just being part of the state championships. So that was quite nice hearing from some of those people there as well. So overall, fantastic. And then golf, you move on to golf. So that's actually finished now.
So the golf's finished, but the bowls are still going, obviously.
The bowls still going, that's right. Golf, they did last Sunday, they did a Pro-Am. Then they did Monday as a Pro-Am as part of the tournament. And then Tuesday, just the players playing by themselves without any amateurs there as well.
Because we had there was a Dubbo girl on this too, wasn't there, I think?
Ella Murray, So
How'd she go? Did she go okay? Or?
I actually don't know. And I should check that out, but I don't know. But this is a regional qualifier event. And so if you place in a certain position, and there's a few technicalities there, but basically this is the way you qualify for the Women's New South Wales Open. And there are a few of these events held, but again, they love the Dubbo Golf Course. I had to talk to some of the organisers there. And one of the things that's great about the Dubbo Golf Course is I remember years ago as a kid growing up, there were 18 holes there. And you'd go out and you'd want to play socially, and there'd be a tournament on, and there's an event on, a tournament on, club championships, whatever, you can't play. They expanded that to 27 holes. What it meant then was that you've got the ability for...
Always a social 9.
Correct. Any comp to be running, and then you've got the social 9. Now, I did say to them, which of the 3 or the 2 9s are you using of the 3 9s available for the tournament? I said, well, actually, a composite. So what they loved about it is you can chop and change and make up to suit whatever you want, whatever style you want. So they had a composite of the 27 holes we've got there to make up their 18. And I got to be the official starter of the day. So I got to announce the players.
Does that mean they sort of set you up on the tee, a bit like the bowls, you have to hit the first ball down the
Well, they didn't get me,
one?
luckily, because I've got a very good slice. Some people call it a bad slice, but it's so impressive, my slice, I call it a good slice. So there might have been some people in danger if they let me hit off first. But I got to announce the players, announce their score from the previous day, and invite them to the tee and hit off. And so I watched a few of the groups go through and announce those, so that was exciting. But just talking to the organisers, they love the Dubbo Golf Course and the organisation there. I talked to one of the greenkeepers there, Mick. I know Mick fairly well, and spoke to him, and the greens look magnificent. The fairways look great, and they knew this event was on, so I'm making sure it was right.
Well. Actually, it's really interesting. I was down there getting my coffee from my regular coffee place during the week, and I was speaking to the guy who's making the coffee there for me. I said, so how have you found the week? Has it been a busy week? And he goes, yeah, he said, it actually has been. He said, the town's buzzing this week. He said, I don't know what's going on. He said, but the town's absolutely buzzing. There's lots of people coming in that I haven't seen before. And I said, oh, well, there's 2 major events on this week happening in town. He goes, oh, really? Oh, well, that probably explains it then. So there you go. That's the situation.
And I suppose this is the thing. We, council, don't receive any extra money out of people coming to the community. Obviously, we think it's important. We've got to balance up how much it might cost us to host some of these events, to attract some of these events. But we know the businesses, the hospitality businesses, the accommodation businesses, all of those benefit out of these events. So
absolutely,
that's kind of interesting that someone doesn't even know that time, but gee, it's a busy week. Fantastic.
Yeah, that's right.
Good luck to them. Now, we do talk about different events. For the touch footy, for example, we made sure that every business that was somehow going to be impacted knew about that. These events, we certainly talk about them as well. But if someone's just opening up, serving coffee and going, good busy day, then that's fantastic. One thing I thought was good as well was in the golf, 45% of the players that were playing in the event in Dubbo were from overseas.
Oh, really?
And it was fascinating.
Oh, wow.
One of the ones where I had to announce the 4 players, the 4 players in that particular playing group that I had to announce, there was 1 Australian and the other 3 were from 3 separate countries. So it gives you an idea of that international flavour and how good it is when we have these type of events on. Regional qualifier for New South Wales Open, you go, is that exciting? Well, it's good, just that injection of people, but also good to expose Dubbo to people from
the world
across
stage.
the world. Yeah, exactly right.
They had an important meeting during the week here, Matt, with Justine Elliot, who's the Assistant Minister for Social Services and the Assistant Minister for the Prevention of Family Violence. Now, she was in Dubbo to announce 15 new safe places for women and children experiencing family and domestic violence that will be provided by the federal government in Dubbo through a Housing Plus plan. She was also here to announce the fact that there was about $32 million of expansion over 2 years for the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander escaping violence payment place-based trial. Talk us through this, Matt. This obviously sounds like a really important initiative that the federal government here has announced, and Dubbo seems to be right at the forefront in regards to benefiting from this announcement.
Well, there's a number of different processes that state and federal government are running through addressing various things in our community. This is certainly one. Domestic violence, there are so many different areas that are talking about domestic violence, and it is probably one of those hidden crimes that's happening in our community. Not everyone reports it. Some people feel embarrassed that they're a victim of domestic violence. I think we're getting better as a community. You shouldn't feel embarrassed about that. You are a victim. You need to talk about this. You need to report this. So I think we're getting better. But one of the things, obviously, is if you are in a situation where you feel like you are unsafe or your children are unsafe, having somewhere to go is pretty important. So Justine Elliot, and I haven't met Justine before, but she invited me along to say hello, and she was in Dubbo only for a short amount of time, but in Dubbo to make a couple of announcements. So it was great to catch up with Justine and just talk about some of these things. But safe places, when you're in a situation when you've got to get out of a DV situation, what do? You might have, especially if your partner has really wrapped you up around his life, maybe the people you know or relatives might be linked to that partner, so it's pretty hard to get away to be somewhere safe. So having safe places, they are in our community. It's not something that is talked about a lot, but if you need that, there is access to those safe places. But the other one is that expansion that you talked about. There's been a trial running up in Cairns, and they spent $7 million in funding for that particular one. This one, as you said, about $32 million they've put in place.
Is that like literally a whole new construction of a safe home type setup?
No, this is a payment. So it's called an EVP, an escaping violence payment. So, for example, if you're in a DV situation, you're in a situation where, and let's face it, it's normally a female that's the victim, it's normally a male that's the perpetrator. So let's call it for what it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your partner, your male partner, has controlled your finances, has controlled your life, and you're sitting there saying, I have to get out of this situation, or I have to get myself and my kids out of the situation. The first thing you need is some money. You've got to have some money. How do you feed your kids? How do you feed yourself? How do you find somewhere to live with no money? And again, you try and get some money out of a bank account, but you haven't got control of the bank account. There's no cash in the house, so it's very difficult to get any control there. And so these escaping violence payments are based on you need some emergency money. There's some money, and I don't know how much it is, but there's some money available to you. So a safe place and some money to get you by until you can start to get yourself back on your feet. That $32 million.
Sorry to interrupt you there, Matt. So if there's a listener out there right now and they're sitting back and going, gee whiz, I had no idea this is an option for me. I can access this. Is there anything available yet onto how they would go about accessing that?
I'm not an expert on DV services, as council doesn't provide those services. So the only advice I could give is to call 1-800-RESPECT, which is 1800-737-732, or visit the website www.1800respect.org.au. And that gives you access to a service run by the federal government to support people who have experienced or are at risk of experiencing sexual assault and or domestic violence. It's under the National Plan to Reduce Violence Against Women and Their Children. So I understand exactly what you're talking about. There might be people listening to it now who are in that situation. What do you do? How do you reach out? Where do you go first? And that's probably the tough part, to find out where you go first.
And I suppose just in regards to that too, like in regards, as you said earlier, there are places in Dubbo, like if someone's experiencing domestic violence right now and they're thinking, how do I get out? Or you may know somebody who may be in that situation. You want to offer them some advice. Who would they go to?
again, 1-800 respecters about the limit of my knowledge when it comes to how to access domestic violence services. The tough part from my perspective is I focus so heavily on things that council's directly involved with. And this particular area, we aren't providing these payments. We're not building these safe houses. They're often, this money is from the federal government. The new safe houses are from the federal government, but there are state-based organisations, and sometimes they're non-government organisations that receive funding from the state government to help with these. So a number of different organisations are out there. But the good part is there are organisations that will find somewhere for you to live in an emergency. Also, this money, and again, this is a place-based trial. So this trial is around people in Dubbo experiencing domestic violence that then can get some of these payments, these escaping violence payments that are available there. Again, I don't even know how much they are. We talked in general, when I spoke to Justine, I didn't drill down to the detail.
Yeah.
The good news is that there are many organisations out there that are there to help.
Absolutely. Now, I noticed here, Matt, that during the week you flew down to Sydney and you caught up there with Jihad, who's the Minister for Customer Service and Digital Government, the Minister for Emergency Services, and the Minister for Youth Justice. Another one of those guys has many caps. Now, I also noticed the fact here that this is a very important meeting because, as discussed there on a couple of podcasts there, we've talked about how we're looking at actually extending the runway out there at the airport, and to do that, it's going to cost about $65 million. So I'm assuming here that you met with Jihad to sort of say, all right, we need some money from the state government here as well as the federal government to get this $65 million.
Exactly right. Now, this is all around, why we chose Jihad for this particular meeting was because it's all around emergency services. We've got an airport out there at the moment, fantastic for our RPT, for our regular passenger traffic. We've got the Q400s from Qantas, we've got the Saab 340Bs from Link Airways and from Rex Airline. So it works well as a passenger terminal and a passenger airport. People will know this during summer. There's a plane that sits off to the on the southern side of the airport. On the southern side of the airport, there's a large plane there, red signage on it there. It's an RJ-85. That comes from Canada.
Is that like the old Elvis sort of one? Remember the Elvis plane used to sort of do the water bombing and
Correct.
stuff like that?
That's exactly like that. Although was Elvis a plane or a helicopter?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
It was a thing that was up in the air anyway.
That's right. Good work. So Captain Rick, I love Captain Rick. He's a Canadian guy.
Right,
he comes over. He loves Dubbo. I'll go out usually and meet with him once or twice during the season and just say good day. And he wants to tell me some of the stories he's had or experience he's had there with some of the things that happened through the summer. Now, the RJ-85 is a certain size plane and it parks itself there, and then they've got retardant you'll see there on that same part of the airport there, the southern side of the airport. There's some retardant there. That goes in the plane. They take off that and they do water bombing. So it's called an LAT. And I haven't been able to find out from anyone whether LAT stands for large air tanker or large aerial tanker, because people seem to use those two terms. They sound pretty much the same.
Yeah. You say potato, I say potato.
That's right. We'll just call it LAT. So that's an LAT. The Rural Fire Service pays a lease to that Canadian company each summer to come out, and they've got a 5-year contract, I think it was, for that. We have to give what's called a concession to that plane for our airport. Our airport runway is rated for a certain weight of aircraft, that use that. So we have to give a concession because that's heavier than our airport allows. Now, what that means is that it's consuming our airport runway faster than our long-term plans would allow us to do. And we're okay with that. We get paid a little bit of money to have the actual plane there, and we get paid a little bit of money by the Rural Fire Service to inspect the airport at the end of each summer to see how much damage has been done. Because, again, we don't want the ratepayers of Dubbo to pay for this, because this is a service we're providing for the whole region. Yeah. And it's fantastic. We've got that here. The last year of that contract is next summer. So the summer for 2024-2025, the RFS contract with that Canadian company for the big RJ-85 that sits there, that contract's finished. What are they going to do after that? Now, RFS has got 737 plane that they use, I think more than one, but at least one they use. Our airport cannot handle a 737 landing on it. It's not long enough in the runway, and the runway is definitely not strong enough to handle a 737. Are they going to then recontract the RJ-85? Not sure. It's a Canadian company. They'll take the best price they can get anywhere in the world to take that plane there. Will they use a 737? Well, great if they do. They can't use Dubbo Airport. In the last government, we got $98,250 from the previous state government to develop a business case about lengthening and strengthening the runway. And this is primarily for the purpose of LATs here in Dubbo.
So it's for emergency reasons, isn't
Correct.
it really?
That's
it.
right.
Yeah.
That's why we want it. Now, the business case has been developed. In round numbers, it's about $65 million to lengthen the runway.
Significant figure, isn't it?
It is. It would take it out to 2,000 metres. It's about 1,700 metres now. It would take it out to 2,000 metres.
Wow.
That would be long enough for 737s.
Do you have to strengthen the runway even more? Or?
Correct. We have to strengthen the runway to handle that. We've basically then gone to emergency services saying this is money that we think makes sense for emergency services to pay for, but we also understand that the emergency services budget isn't that large, so it probably needs a whole of government approach, because what happens when you've got bushfires, it affects a whole range of different government departments, government areas, not just emergency services.
It's almost like an insurance policy.
It affects insurances as well.
You know what I mean? Like that's what it boils down to, is the fact that if you spend the money, I know it may be a bit of a pain to do it, but the potential for the fact that if you don't put it down, if you don't spend the money in that area, boy, oh boy, the cost could be a hell lot more than 60-odd million.
And geographically, we're perfectly located. You can have these planes go to Richmond, for example, but if you've got a fire out in this area, you've got to take off from Richmond.
Back and forth.
Right.
It's not just sort of one hit.
Yeah, you've got to take off, get out here, whatever time it takes to get out to where the fire is,
Yeah.
use it, and then get back to Richmond. And
That's right. Oh, there's a 2-hour, 3-hour turnaround. They're easy.
Yeah, and I don't know the exact timing, but they all say that Dubbo is a great spot geographically. Now, we understand that Jihad doesn't have the money in his budget, but let's start there. But we also understand it's unlikely the state government's going to have all the money. So we've said we think this is going to be best utilised as a joint approach. You, the state government, find somewhere half, $30 million, around that sort of number. And then we think the best way to go is with state side by side with council to go to the federal government and say, you've got some emergency services, you've got some resilience money, you've got some money in different buckets there. We've got half from the state, and the federal government, we've seen this federal government typically like to not give any more than half for any project. So if you're going to have a project, we need you to find some money somewhere else. And I don't mind that approach. If we find half from the state, half from the federal, then we think that's reasonable. Keep in mind, you do anything to an airport, it takes time. Strengthening, and we did do a project years ago. I remember I got a check from Troy Grant when Troy Grant was a local member to do some work on the airport. But I remember trying to facilitate that work around aircraft still coming in and out. That was quite difficult.
Well, I was going to say, if by chance we happen to get this, which would be great if we do, and I think for all of New South Wales, not just simply for Dubbo, but I think all of New South Wales would benefit enormously from something like this as an idea. Would that then hold up our current services from the domestic point of view?
Well, this is the challenge. If we got that money tomorrow, then planning how you do that. And they did a lot of nighttime work last time when they did some work on the runway.
Yeah.
So there'd be nighttime work. The lengthening part would probably be okay, because the lengthening part is part of the runway that our normal passenger planes don't use at the moment. But the strengthening part, which you're doing work on the existing runway, that gets a bit trickier. So it is tricky, but we've done it before. We've managed to do it, but it takes time. And so this is the thing. We're stressing now that the next fire season is your last with the Age 85. When you get to the 2025-2026 fire season, if you haven't got the Age 85, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
If you want to use the 737 from Dubbo, then you need to start thinking about this now, which is why we've gone now.
Yeah.
And we also realise you've got a budget process with the state government coming up towards the end of June. If you're going to try and put some money in your budget, that'd be the time to do it. Then we start to approach federal government. And then even if you got the money, the planning, going out to tender, all that process, that'll take time.
Isn't it? So was Jihad was he warming to the idea?
He loved the idea.
Warming to the idea?
Loved the idea. Absolutely loved the idea. Just didn't have the money. And he brought Dougal Saunders.
But he does have a budget coming up.
He does have a budget meeting coming up. He brought Dougal Saunders in as well as our local member and talked about it from that perspective. We had Commissioner Rob Rogers there as well from the RFS, and he talked about it. So there was definitely support in the room. But obviously, Jihad didn't pull out the checkbook and write out the check on the spot. And we get that, which is why we've started these meetings early to try and get this.
Well, that's the thing, is it? Like, best case scenario, to be honest, would be the fact they put into the next budget.
Absolutely right. Whether I don't think the emergency services could do it in their budget, but again, that's where Jihad said the best way to approach this is a whole of government approach. So to basically get some money from different departments and then stand back holistically and say, we need to approach this from a government perspective, not from one department perspective. So I think that's a good positive step. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And look, it's always interesting being at Parliament House too. And I actually had a little bit of time at that particular meeting.
Yeah, I was going to ask you the question. So look, when you get down there to Parliament House, do you get around? Do you actually sort of get a chance to, go and sit and watch the parliamentarians do their thing?
Well, it's interesting. Again, you're trying to find timing when it suits with flights to Sydney, and then when the ministers can meet, and this particular meeting got changed. I had one sort of process we thought was going to work, and then they changed the time of that. So end up with a little bit of spare time, which is fine. I normally will catch up with a few people that I know. So Adam Marshall, for example, a minister up the Northern Tablelands, up the sort of Tamworth area there. So I know him and ran into him, had a bit of a chat to him about a few different things. Dougal, obviously, our local member, had a bit of a chat to him. But I had probably 10 or 15 minutes before I had this meeting with Jihad, and I'd caught up on a couple of emails, and I thought, well, I might just go and sit in and watch Parliament, because it's interesting when you do that. Yeah. And you've got the Legislative Assembly, where your local members like Dougal sit, and you've got your Legislative Council, which is where the MLC sit. And the Assembly wasn't sitting at the time, but the Council was, so I slipped into there. And I also know there'd been some announcements made by the government that day, so I thought there'd probably be a little bit of discussion around that. So I sat in there and watched 10 or 15 minutes of that particular process in there. And not the first time I've done it, but just thought I'd duck in and see how they were going. And it always does disappoint me every time I do go there, I must admit.
Why is that?
Just the behaviour of, and this is at the federal level, this is at the state level, I'm not picking up on any one particular party or any one particular group, it's all of them. It just seems so rude and inconsiderate. And maybe I'm sounding very boring now, but
no.
Council meetings, I've been obviously to lots of Dubbo Council meetings, Dubbo Council, Dubbo Regional Council. I've been to council meetings at other councils around the state. And at a council meeting, the mayor controls the meeting, and every councillor knows when they stand up to talk that councillor talks. The other councillors, you can see them fidgeting in their chairs. They're really keen to say something, but they don't say anything.
No.
The gallery is very respectful in a council meeting. The gallery says nothing. So everyone is quiet. That one person talks. Now, another councillor might absolutely 100% disagree with what that person's saying, but they bide their time and they wait till that person's finished and they sit down, and then as the mayor you'll say, now Councillor X, and that councillor stand up. Now they might say, well, that was the biggest lot of rubbish ever. I mean, you're not insulting other people, but they'll say, I think that instead of it being red, it should be blue. Instead of it being X, it should be Y.
But they'll wait for that opportunity to
They'll wait for the opportunity, and they'll be respectful in that process. And again, as the mayor chairing that meeting, if they're not respectful, if they start saying that Councillor X is the biggest idiot in the world, I'll say, stop, please. Please apologise to Councillor X. We're talking about the ideas, the concepts before. You mightn't agree with the concepts, but we don't want to have people insulting councillors in meetings. And this council, I have not had to pull up any councillor for insulting councillors. I've had to pull up the gallery a couple of times and saying you can't be insulting councillors, but I've never had to pull up the councillors. They're very respectful and people speak one at a time. But at state, and the same at federal, but when I watch that, the person speaking, there's just a constant chatter of other things being said, people talking at them, people harumphing, people laughing at different things that are being said. It just seems like a very rude, inconsiderate process. Now, Ben Franklin's the president of the Legislative Council, so a couple of times he had to say order, and that might quieten them down for a good 3 or 4 milliseconds, and then it just continues to go on and build up.
It's almost like, to me, having sat and watched, I've never been to a state sitting of any of the levels of Parliament there in state, but I've been to a few there with the federal, and it's the same thing there, as you say. It's almost like it's expected behaviour. From the point of view of the backbenchers or even the opposition or whoever, it doesn't really matter. If you're sitting there and it sort of comes across almost as expect behaviour. I'm with you. I find it incredibly disrespectful. I would find it so frustrating. If I'm standing there speaking, I'd think, if I'm going to sit and listen to you speak about whatever, I'll give you the sheer sense of respect and decency to listen to you out. And then if I have an opposing argument, I'll get up and I'll say it. But I expect you to listen to me as well. That to me is just, as you say, this word respect is something that, and it is the annoying part, and I can see why people get so frustrated with parliamentarians at times, is when they get up there and then they start getting very lectury in regards to what society should be like and what we should be doing here. And then they watch them behave in that scenario. It's like a kindergarten child will behave better in a classroom. I don't get it either, Matt. I don't get why they carry on like that. I don't get why at a local level it's expected, but yet at a state or a federal level it's open slather. I
think it seems to come down to point scoring. I think sometimes people say, oh, yes, we scored a few points on Billy today. Wasn't that great? But as a community member, I'm not keeping the score. I'm not sitting there going, there's some great points scored. I want to see people who are going to progress my community forward. And when I see that, it is disappointing. So you're right, it's a bit frustrating. It would take a brave person to go in as a newbie in Parliament and say, this isn't acceptable behaviour.
Yeah.
Let's not do that, because you would go in and you would learn the behaviour from the people that are already there,
Yeah.
and there'd be a fair bit of pressure from the other people that are already there to behave the same way. But I'd love someone to be brave enough to say, this simply isn't good enough.
Absolutely.
We can take a stand and we can make a difference there.
Yep. And, we talk about, say, there's been lots of issues over the past, unfortunately, with Canberra, and they talk about in Canberra, and the same thing obviously applies in Sydney. It probably applies in Brisbane and Adelaide, you name it, any of the capital scenario, where you get these situations of some pretty ordinary behaviours being disclosed across the board in some of these places. It must start, I'd be suggesting, within what's expected behaviour, even sitting there having decent discussions about important issues. It's not like you're talking about the latest football scores. You're sitting there, you're talking about life and death stuff. You're talking about billions of dollars of operational costs and things like that, and where this money's going to go. And what do you get? You get this rubbish going on from people in the back and this sort of stuff, and carrying on like absolute pork chops. Yeah, it's so frustrating and it's so disrespectful. And as a community, I'm more than happy to turn around and say, it's disgraceful. Stop it. Simple as that.
And I think you mentioned the point there, a kindergarten teacher wouldn't tolerate that sort of behaviour.
You wouldn't tolerate it in your family.
Yeah.
You wouldn't tolerate it even with your mates at a pub, to be honest. Why would you need to tolerate it at a state or federal level? So wake up to yourself, those people who are doing it.
And remember, laws are made. The definition of a politician can be someone who is a lawmaker. Laws are made in Parliament, and this is the process we go through. So anyway, it is a bit disappointing. And I suppose I knew.
I'm glad you raised it, because it's a bugbear for me, and I'm sure it's a bugbear for others.
And people can watch it on TV. They can watch federal, they can watch state on TV, so you can actually see the way they behave. And so it's not me making it up. It's you watch the behaviour
what happens, Yeah, exactly right. Go and watch wrestling instead. Now, during the week, you had the chance to, John Laws, the producer there, contact you, have a chat to him. Now, obviously, he's a morning DJ down there. He's been around for many years, Laws. You had a chat to him down there, or via the phone, I was suggesting. What was the reason for the phone call, and what was the chat about?
It's interesting. You can probably chase some media attention if you really want. I'm happy to talk to anyone, any media outlet that calls me. I can't remember ever saying no to a media outlet that rings me and asks me for comment on whatever, because I think that's part of my job as spokesperson. But some people like to chase it, but I won't and I don't. But John Law's producer rang me, and I didn't realise. I've been too busy to sit there and listen to the radio, listen to John Laws, but John Laws has been having a little bit to say about Dubbo and about crime in general, and that might have been stirred up by some other people pushing some different agendas there.
Okay.
But his producer rang and said, "Are you happy to have a chat to John Laws?" I said, "Yeah, happy to have a chat to John Laws." And he was a little bit surprised, actually, that I was happy to say
okay, right.
yes.
Yeah.
So he lined up, I think from the time he rang me or contacted me, it was probably 10 or 15 minutes later, then I'm on the John Laws show. Now, what prompted this was the latest report from BOCSAR of crime stats.
Right.
And it is one of my frustrations that I have that it takes so long for the crime data to come out. They report the data quarterly, but it takes 2.5 months to come out. Now, on the John Laws show, I said
so frustrating,
it was about 6 to 8 weeks, but when I actually went back and had a look at the data, it's normally... I thought it might have just been because it was the December period that it was a bit later this time. But when I went back and looked at the previous ones, it's typically 2.5 months for that data to come out. I've actually spoken to BOCSAR about that. I've spoken to some people in state government. I've spoken to some people in the court system and said to all of them, why does it take so long? And more to the point, is there any way we can get the data sooner? But BOCSAR have told me officially the reason they do it is because they want to make sure the data's checked. They want to do any editing they need to do. They need to make sure it's all correct. And plus, things might change in the future. So when they release the next set of results, they want to make sure the previous results are consistent. But I don't think it'll change that much. If I'm in a business and I want to see how my business is going and I talk to the manager of my business, I don't want to see last quarter's data 2.5 months later and say, hold on, you didn't sell many of these blue widgets last quarter. What happened there? Oh, we didn't realise. So you want immediate access to data, or maybe not immediate, but timely access to data to be able to make decisions on it. So that's the first part. But anyway, the BOCSAR figures came out. They had a few different things there. One thing they had was this comparison between rural and regional and the city. And so they lump, I don't know why they do this, but they put Sydney. So Sydney basically includes Greater Sydney. I think it includes Wollondilly. It includes Blue Mountains. And then that's Sydney, and then regional is
It's everybody else.
everywhere else. So it includes Newcastle, it includes Wollongong, it includes...
Lots of demographics, lots of different type of lifestyle choices, lots of different sort of things like that.
Right.
Yeah,
So
okay.
I don't really realise the point of that. It doesn't really drill down to Dubbo. But of course we look at Dubbo stats.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there are some people in our community who would like to focus on the negative of those stats. There is crime in Dubbo. There's no doubt about that. There's crime everywhere across the state. There's crime everywhere across the nation. No one's denying there isn't crime. But some people, for a convenient political agenda, if you like, might like to say there's a crime spree in certain areas. And if I was a populist, sensationalist mayor, then it'd be very easy to me. I'd be on the John Law show every week, on the Today show, every different Sydney media outlet you can imagine, with me jumping up and down saying there's a crime spree in Dubbo. It's the worst thing ever in Dubbo. It's terrible. We've got to fix it. There's blood on the streets. There's crime happening all over the place. The media would love that. They would lap that up.
Absolutely. Well, here's the thing, is the fact, picking up on that, I did read one comment there in regards to the interview and what John Laws sort of said. Now, picking up on your point, John Laws referred to you as gutless. I thought, geez, come on, mate. You have no idea who you're talking about here in regards to what this bloke's trying to do. But that's the reference there was referring to you to gutless. Now, what is he stating here, the fact that you're gutless because you're not that type of mayor?
I think it's the image that was portrayed to John Laws by people who are pushing a certain agenda. I think the image was portrayed as the mayor's doing nothing about crime. He's too gutless to do something about crime. Now, I don't know why it would take courage to do something about crime, why you would be gutless if you didn't do something about crime. But it comes out the point we've talked about before.
Did he pick you up on any points in regards to that? Like, did he ask you in regards to, are you doing such and such? Are you doing this or what?
Well, it's an interesting interview and worth listening to. About 13 minutes he gave me, which I think was very generous of him. But he went through and did talk about, why don't you send a letter off to the police minister? Why don't you send a letter to the government? Why don't you ask for 24-hour policing in Wellington? And when I kept responding that, yes, in fact, I'd done all of those things that he was asking about, finally by the end of the interview, he actually said, well, you sound like a very decent man doing his best. He said, you find yourself in a difficult position. He said, I do understand that. And he said, I think you sound like a reasonable man and you're doing your best.
So he's pulled back from the gutless comment from the sound.
By the end of the interview,
Yeah,
certainly
right.
he changed his tune. But again, he'd never spoken to me before, so he'd have no idea, as you say, about that. But again, he'd been fed that the Dubbo mayor's doing nothing. Now, there's lots of things in that. One part of it is how you paint the stats. You can pull stats, lies, damn lies, and statistics is the old quote. And you can make stats look or do really whatever you want to do. You can cherry pick, you can manipulate them in any way you want. You can make Dubbo look bad or good. But again, if I did, as I said before, if I was a sensationalist, populist mayor that was chasing media attention for myself or trying to promote myself, there's an election coming up in September this year. Maybe I want to promote myself and go and promise to the people of Dubbo that I'll solve all their crime problems.
Yeah.
The issue there is the damage that I would be doing to Dubbo's reputation would be untold. Next time we try and get bowls New South Wales State Championships, they'd say, actually, I've heard you've got a pretty bad crime issue there. Where'd you hear that? Well, from you, actually. I was watching the Today show and you told everyone what a terrible crime issue you've got in Dubbo. So, actually, we're not going to take the bowls Championships there, or the regional qualifiers for New South Wales Open, or the touch footy, or the cricket, and I can go on and on and on. So, the last thing I think Dubbo needs, or any community needs, is a mayor that tries to score some cheap political points or some cheap publicity out of running down the community that you are representing.
And I totally agree. And I also think that here's an interesting point too. You've been accused of being a mayor who believes that crime doesn't exist in town. That's been some of the statements being bandied across the social media points, as the fact that he's a disbeliever. He's living in this world. The fact that it's living in a bubble. You know, that feels that there's no crime in Dubbo. You know, what a goose. This sort of thing. You know, he just doesn't want to face up to it. I don't see that at all. But what's your response to those sort of comments?
Well, I'd love to see anywhere that anyone could quote me where I've actually said there is no crime in Dubbo. I've never said that. I've talked about no crime spree. Yep. I've talked about the fact that crime isn't out of control in Dubbo. And I stand by those statements. I don't think any of those are true. I don't think there's a crime spree. I don't think crime's out of control. Would I like to see less crime? Absolutely. There's no doubt about that. But the thing that you do, if you're chasing publicity, is you go out there and tell people about all these issues and try and chase the publicity. People would have no idea about the number of conversations or emails or letters that are sent off from myself or in other organisations that we are represented on. So, for example, organisations like country mayors. Country mayors have been pushing the barrow about doing more for regional crime.
Yep.
Absolutely. We support them in that. Does it have more strength coming from country mayors representing all the regional councils across the state or one mayor? Now, if people talk about, getting the police minister to come out and solve the problem, there's 128 councils across the state.
Yeah.
There's 128 councils that have got crime in their local government area across the state. Do you think the police minister is going to respond better to one individual mayor or to one group like country mayors representing a number of mayors there or a number of councils? So we do send off letters, though, to police ministers. I do meet with the commander. I meet with the commander every 3 months and we sit down and go through a whole range of information. But again, it comes back to that interesting issue that I don't control the levers for crime. Council doesn't control the levers. And again, when I say I, as a mayor, I have very little power. I've got certain roles that I have to undertake as mayor that I'm expected to undertake. Being spokesperson for council and council decisions is one of those. But a resolution of council, I need a majority of council. So anything that we would want to do with crime, I need a resolution of council, but we don't have the power to do those things. I meet with the police commander, very nice gentleman. We have a lovely conversation. But if I said, Tim, I need you to go and put 5 police on that corner because there's a crime issue there.
Yep.
Tim would say, with the greatest respect, Matthew, you don't tell me what to do. And we've never had that conversation because we both know the roles that we undertake.
Yep.
But he would be well within his rights to say, get stuffed, Matthew.
Yep.
And again, he wouldn't do it. He's a nice gentleman, but get stuffed, Matthew. You don't tell me what to do. You're just the mayor of council. I'm employed by the state government. I answer to the police minister, not you. The magistrates are the same. They're independent. The sentencing regime is the same. It's controlled by the state government. So there are no levers that I can pull directly. Now, what we do, and again, people wouldn't be aware of this, is we facilitate meetings and discussions. So we might meet with PCYC and talk about some of the tactics they've got in place. Apollo House is a great organisation in Dubbo. Work with them. We leased some land to Apollo House. You may remember we've spoken about it before down at Regan Park. And again, in discussion with Apollo House, here's some land that you can have to use for some of the activities you do. So we're helping them out in terms of that facilitation. We bring government departments together. We bring non-government agencies or organisations together to have those conversations, but we can't direct them.
Because you're working within the realms of what you can do.
Exactly right. And again, I'd be lying to the community. It'd be very popular for me to go out and say, please, in September, elect me again because I'll fix all those crime issues. It'd be very easy to say that. And I've seen councillors in the past who have done exactly that, where they've gone out with a popular slogan or a popular statement, knowing full well they cannot deliver on that. But it's popular and you're hoping the community doesn't understand enough about the 3 levels of government. There's a whole range of things that I don't control. I'm involved in a cancer fundraiser, Dancing with the Stars, to raise some money for cancer. We don't control the health budget. We don't control the federal government, the money that's put into cancer research, for example. The little bit that we might be able to do is I can go and do a silly dance that might raise a couple of $1,000s for cancer research that does one little tiny step along the way. With crime, it's a bit the same. We can take one little tiny step here and there, but we don't control the big levers. And one of the things the government talked about during the week was some of those levers that they're going to change in terms of some of the changes they're making.
Yep. Now, well done. I think you've answered the question very well. So can we turn now to some of the latest statistics then in regards to this? I think it's very interesting now to see what's actually happening. And I've got these statistics here in front of me. These are the latest BOCSAR statistics that come out. Now, what I've got in front of me, I'll let you talk them through here, but I find this quite fascinating, and it sort of sways in the face of where a lot of maybe people are thinking is actually happening, because there's some statistics here which I'm pretty sure people are going to go, really? Is that actually what the situation is? Talk us through it. Now, can we start off with maybe where some of the problems are and where our figures are actually getting worse?
So there's a couple of things here. As I said, you can pluck figures and cherry pick figures and do whatever you want with figures to make a community look good or bad. And so what I'm going to do is give you a few figures here, because one of the main things I look at is the change over the last quarter. When people say, crime's out of control this week, well, I can't tell you this week because I don't have the data to back that up. Just because you got broken into, it feels like crime's out of control because it's very personal. But it doesn't mean it is out of control across the entire area. And again, I've talked about the delay in these stats, so it's a bit frustrating. But this is the quarter that ended December 2023. So I look at changes. So how well have we been going in terms of crime over that quarter? And there's all sorts of different categories. So if I want to make Dubbo look good, I'd say break and enter dwelling dropped by 13.6%. That is a true and accurate valid stat. Across the state, it went up by 1%. So it dropped in Dubbo, even though it went up across the state. Break and enter non-dwelling went down by 6.8%. Across the state, went up by 3.1%. So that's fairly significant. Motor vehicle theft. Often people talk about, I see one burnout car, there's cars all over the place. Motor vehicle theft went down by 7.5%. Across the state, up by 3.2%.
Three things there, by the way, which have been very prominently banning about with issues here in Dubbo in the last week.
Exactly right. And the last one is that as well. Steal from motor vehicle went down by 8.5%. Across the state, up by 1%. So you're right. People feel their car and their house are under threat. And even though those stats are changing, remember, they're still happening. And they're still happening across the state. They're increasing across the state, decreasing across Dubbo. So those four I've picked in particular because they show, exactly as you said, those things that people are going, I don't want my house broken into, I don't want my car stolen. So the community, not council, council can't really take any credit for this at all. But the community in general, policing, the sentencing regime, has been quite effective there. Even robbery went down by 6.3%. In the state, it went down by 3.8%. So even though it went down across the state, we were even better here. Other stealing offences went down by 4%. Across the state, went up by 1.2%. So if I want to cherry pick, there's some cherry picking that's fantastic. It's gone in the right direction, a whole range of categories that people are certainly aware of. If you want to make Dubbo look bad, then I'd pick on DV. DV-related assault, 7.2% increase. Across the state, 2.1% increase. So DV is certainly an issue in Dubbo. There's no doubt about that. We know that. We know that that data is bad, and that's probably why Justine Elliot, when she made that announcement, has chosen Dubbo as the second pilot for that EVP.
Can I sort of pick you up there too on the fact that there's a classic example of where people who actually can do something about this are trying to do something about this. This is where you get federal government coming in of saying, okay, well, we've identified Dubbo as a real problem with the domestic violence. There's a reason why that they've come here to put this new initiative in, because we have a real problem here with the domestic violence. There's no two ways about that. No one here is sitting here saying we don't have that problem. We do have a problem. Federal government, though, they're putting the money in here to say, okay, what can we do to help? This is, again, who can do the control? Who can actually do the help where the help needs to be sort of had?
Yeah, so I think you're right, and that's where they would look at the data and say, where do we need to throw some effort? And again, it doesn't need me to have a crime inquiry or to jump up and down on the media, on the Sydney media. For the government, there's people in government.
These discussions are happening every day.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Like it's you don't need someone to bandy this across on the media or social welfare, or as a social media, should I say, to turn around and tell people, oh, wait a minute, hey, look what we've got a real problem here. People know this. And this is why federal government are putting money into this space.
There are people in federal and state government, in particular in state government, who
absolutely
that's their job to go through this.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Now, again, if I want to make things look bad, I'd look at sexual assault. Sexual assault across the state went up by 18.5%.
Which is just horrendous.
It is. Now, it also went up in Dubbo. So, again, you can cherry pick those figures. The other one that I think, which logically, when I think about these things, do I feel safe walking down the main street of Dubbo at night compared to some places in Sydney? And I would say absolutely safer. Even car theft, I'm thinking if I parked my car down the main street of Dubbo and left it there, I would feel more confident that it would be there than in some suburbs in Sydney. So the other part of the data, I looked at some ratios, if you like, of Dubbo.
This is really interesting, this is quite fascinating. Talk us through some of these.
So compare Dubbo, the likelihood, if you like, of certain crimes being inflicted upon you against other areas, other local government areas. Now remember, this is the 128 local government areas across the state. So when you look at something, so again, if I pick on motor vehicle theft, I'm 2.83 times more likely to have my car stolen in Blacktown than Dubbo. Now, that's based on how many incidents did we see across the Dubbo Regional Council local government area across 7,536 square kilometres. And then in Blacktown, across how big Blacktown is, 10 or 20 square kilometres of Blacktown, how many, so the outright number of incidents, and there were 2.83 times as many incidents in Blacktown. And that kind of makes sense to me. If I park my car in Blacktown, I reckon there's a much greater chance. In fact, there's a 2.83 times greater chance that it'll be stolen. Steal from motor vehicle, so leave your car somewhere. Don't leave your wallet or your phone shown, but if you do, maybe someone will steal it. I'm 3.91 times more likely to have something stolen from my motor vehicle in Newcastle than I am in Dubbo.
Well, even there, the break and enter rates in a dwelling in Newcastle, you're twice more likely to have that happen in Newcastle than in Dubbo.
So break and enter dwelling, 2.03 times more likely to happen in Newcastle.
Yep.
Break and enter non-dwelling, 1.43 times more likely to happen in Sydney City Council area than it is in Dubbo. So you've got all these. Steal from retail store, 6.3 times more likely to happen in Sydney City Council. Other stealing offences, 8.79 times more likely to happen in Sydney City Council. Malicious damage, 2.27 times more likely in Blacktown. So
I reckon the big point here, no one's saying that these things aren't happening in Dubbo. But what we are saying here is the fact that, hey, there's other places out there it's happening and it's worse.
Correct. And even this one surprised me. Sexual assault, 4.45 times more likely to happen on the Central Coast than it is in Dubbo. Sexual touching, sexual act and other sexual offences, 3.86 times more likely to happen in the Central Coast. So when you start to look at some of those figures, you start to think, even domestic violence. So DV, assault under DV, 3.18 times more likely to happen in Blacktown.
Yep.
Now, the other thought that's interesting, and I don't know how you would break this down statistically, but it kind of makes sense logically. Dubbo's big, 7,536 square kilometres. When you look at some of these areas, if you look at the Blacktowns or the Sydney City Council or the Canterbury Bankstown, some of these suburbs in Sydney, the Liverpools, for example, some of those are very small suburbs. Now, all of these bits of data, all these data points I'm using are all based on per capita. But if I park my car in Blacktown in Sydney, for example, there's a lot more people that live around that area. So across an area, you see a much greater likelihood, even though it's more likely on a per capita basis, there's a lot more population density, if you like, in some of these areas in Sydney. So again, and I don't have any data to back this one up, I'm not sure how I feel about this, how I'd break this down from a stats point of view, but when I park it in a certain area, if I park it down the main street, there's a lot more people in that area. So not only in Blacktown, if I think about motor vehicle theft, I'm 2.83 times more likely to have my car stolen on a per capita basis because there's a much greater population density. Parking in a certain area,
Be worse still, I'd say.
Worse still, that's right. Yeah. So it's how you want to break down the stats. Bottom line is three messages here. Number one, yes, we've got crime in Dubbo. No one's denying we've got crime in Dubbo. Number two, Dubbo does not have a crime spree. Dubbo is not out of control with crime. The stats, depending on how you look at them, show that it's not out of control.
Yep.
Number
and
three,
in quite a few areas, they're improving.
Exactly right. And number three, council is not the organisation, not the government level that can control the levers of crime. So regardless of what I do in terms of the levers that I pull, I don't have the budget or the powers as the mayor and councillors, to be fair to councillors, council resolutions, we can't go and put council resolutions forward that are going to make changes. We think sentencing laws need to be strengthened up. Well, put a resolution through council to do that, but it doesn't change anything. It means nothing because we don't control the power of that. So they're the three messages that I would send in relation to all of this.
Well done. Well spotted. Hey, it seems like yesterday we talked about this, but the budget's about to come up again. It's hard to believe, of course. It's June is when they officially start to sort of put the budget together. Give the announcement budget. So right now the first workshop's being held to start thinking about the next financial year's budget. Boy, oh boy, that came around fast.
It does seem early, doesn't it? So we've got, you're right, we had our first workshop during the week, and basically it was a helicopter view of the budget, big picture items, talked about some of the major capital expenses, talked about some of the areas. It's really to get councillors and to a certain extent the community thinking about it, because sometimes people say, well, I'd like you to spend money on this, and well, it's not in our budget, so we're not going to do it this year. Well, when are you going to do it? Well, each year we make a decision on the next year's budget. We do long-term budgets as well, but each year. So if there are things that you want to put in the budget, well, now's the time to talk to a councillor and say, we really need to spend some money on this particular area. The budget needs to have this addressed, whatever it might be, whether it be large capital expenditure, whether it be an ongoing program, whatever it might be. Now's the time to do it. And again, councillors are in the head space for doing this at the moment.
So is this the time then, if I'm a citizen, to come across and to approach one of the aldermen to sort of say, hey, listen, I've got some thoughts in regards to where money should go, or to speak to council through the Your Say sites, or what's the go? Absolutely
right. If you've got anything that you would rather see money being spent on, and one of the things I often say to people is come forward with the ideas in terms of what you want to do. Yep. Also think about, we've got a finite bucket, so think about where we might remove it from. You don't have to, that can be councillors' job to do that, but when you say, look, we really need to spend some money on this, well, what program would you like to remove? Or spend some money on building this particular asset. So which one of the things we're going to build would you like to have removed? Because that's what we've got to do. Ultimately, we've got to say this in priority for our community. These items here are the highest priority in our community. These are the ones we need to address. It's a tough juggling act, but certainly now is the time to start having those thoughts and having those conversations.
It was a bit like when you were down there during the week talking to Jihad Dib. It's getting him sort of thinking about his next budget as well.
Exactly right. You're spot on.
Had a board meeting during the week with the Alliance of Western Councils. Now, this used to be the old OROC group. How'd the board meeting go and what did you discuss?
A range of things. And I think the important thing here, we talked before, last week we were down in Wagga and Albury with Regional Cities New South Wales, 15 councils there, Alliance of Western Councils, 13 councils there. One thing that I think is really important is having these conversations with other councils. You just learn, share ideas. So, for example, just a simple thing, one of the councils, when we were talking about it, one of the mayors from another council talked about how long their council meetings went for, and they were taking up the better part of a day. They'd start at 9 o'clock in the morning and finish at 3 o'clock in the afternoon for a council meeting.
Geez, that's a big day.
It is. And a couple of the councils, a couple of the mayors in the sitting around the table said, well, that seems long. How do you do this? And it was just a bit of advice around fine-tuning some of their processes and maybe changing some of them. So things like that, you're always learning and working out ways to do things differently. One of the people, so we often have at the Alliance meeting, we often have people come along and just talk to the board or get some feedback. And it's easier for them, if it's an organisation, it's easier to talk to 13 councils at once rather than just 13 individual conversations. We had New South Wales Productivity Commissioner there, a gentleman by the name of Peter, and he had one of his other people, an advisor there called Tim. And the main topic they wanted to talk about was water and sewerage and how councils manage that across the various 13 councils. Now, there's a variety of sizes. Dubbo is the largest one of those. Mudgee would be the second largest. And then you've got a lot of councils that are maybe 2,000, 3,000 people. It's fair to say that the economies of scale that can be realised in somewhere like Dubbo are dramatically different to somewhere like a Burke or a Warren, for example. And so you could see the Product Commissioner's head, you can see Peter's head kind of spinning almost with all these things being thrown at him. Because just thinking about how you run a viable water treatment business when you've got such low numbers. And I won't say which council this was, but one council said, one of the mayors from one of the councils said the question was, how do you arrive at your pricing that you charge for water? And one mayor said, at our council, we've got no hope of being able to charge enough for the water to cover the cost of running our water treatment plant. The way we decide our pricing is we charge the absolute maximum we can before someone will come and burn the council building down.
Is that right?
Now, the more politically correct way to express that would be we charge as much as our residents can bear to pay. But it was
I like his honesty.
Well,
her honesty, maybe even. Who knows? That's right.
You're absolutely spot on because the Productivity Commissioner was there going, wow, is it that bad? And this particular mayor said, if we put our prices up to what we need to charge to cover the cost of running our operating plant, then there would be howls of protest. They'd be marching on the council chambers. It would be horrific because they simply can't,
so to speak.
Yeah, they simply can't afford to pay. Now, again, how do you fix these problems? And one of the issues we talked about was you can run a water treatment process in some places where you're covering the operating costs, but the upgrade, and this is the thing, there are standards we've got to stick to, Australian drinking water standards, which is fine. We don't want to be delivering unsafe water to our residents. But to deliver to those standards, it's expensive to build a water treatment plant. If you're running with only a couple of thousand customers, how do you talk about getting enough money, build up in reserves or taking out a loan to pay for a major upgrade? So that was a tricky part. Now, the part of the problem there was the grant process. So you feel like you can't really budget to upgrade that water treatment plant when it needs to be upgraded because you're just hoping with your fingers crossed and saying, please, sir, can I have another? You're hoping to get the grants from the government, usually state, maybe sometimes federal, to actually be able to do those upgrades. So it was, I think, a bit of an eye-opener for the Productivity Commissioner. We also had Dougal came along. He obviously is a local member. Dougal and Roy Butler will often come along as well. Roy didn't come to this one, just to get an update on what's happening at state government level. And then the council get a chance to talk to him. And we also had Erica Tudor from NBN just talk about some of the different upgrades and changes happening with the NBN. So again, good discussions with those people, but also good discussions just around the table in general and learning from each other.
Another worthwhile meeting. I like this. I saw a photo of you during the week, dressed up in your suit there with the apron in front of you, cooking up a barbecue. Now this was, what have we got there? Travelled to Wellington to cook a barbecue for the seniors in Wellington at the Wellington Senior Citizen Club. This is very nice of you, mate. What drew you down there? Was there a particular reason why you felt that, to go along, it's time to show off your barbecuing skills?
It almost looked like a stage photo, that one, didn't it?
Look, I didn't want to say anything there, Matt, but you've been accused many a times of wearing that suit too regularly, so I don't know.
So I did do a few good solid minutes on the barbecue, but there were some other great volunteers there doing the barbecue. We're in seniors' time at the moment. It's a number of seniors' activities that are on.
So is it Senior Citizens Week?
Oh, it's not a week anymore. It used to be Senior Citizens Week, and then it grew from that.
Oh, okay.
So
it's like birthdays have sort of moved out to birthday weeks in some families, haven't they?
I'm convinced my oldest daughter has a birthday month. I think she celebrates for the whole month. So it's lots of senior activities on at the moment.
Right,
this was just another one of those. It was a barbecue that was put on for seniors. And normally I've been down there, that same location to the Wellington Senior Citizen Club a few times, but this time they had Maranatha House came along as well. So residents from Maranatha House down there in Wellington. And they do a really good job there.
So, did you do some poetry again, did you? Or?
I did do some poetry. They demanded of me. I actually did say to them.
Demanded of you?
They demanded of me. That people that are a bit older are wise enough to enjoy my poetry.
There you go.
But I did say to them that our budgets are very tight and we can't pay for entertainment, so the mayor has to do the entertainment. So
if you're in Wellington, you have to be doing Mayor from Ironbark, surely.
Well, I try not to. That is my favourite poem,
yes.
and I do that regularly, but I try to do different poems for them each time. So I did do a different poem, or a couple of different poems this time. So that was fine there. I did actually post on social media saying that the residents survived my cooking skills. I did actually have some people say, did they survive your poetry as well? So I'm here to announce that they survived, all the residents survived my poetry and my cooking.
Oh, nice work.
They survived both.
Well done. Now, I think it might have been last week's podcast. We talked about the new type of parking infringement arrangement set up down there at CBD and how we've got all these new whiz-bang little setups there with electronic buzzers and lighting and, I don't know, you've got the better term of phrase than I have. I'm just rambling on there with something. And but it looks as though, I think one of the concerns has been that if you do get a parking infringement, you don't get that instant, ticket that would sit on your windscreen to say the fact that you've been fined. And, like most situations, you get a speeding fine, you'll get in the mail a couple of weeks later a lovely letter from the state government stating the fact you're 10 or 15 k's over. In this case, you'd probably get an infringement notice sent through from council, would have been sent through letters. But this looks as though it might change. It looks as though there's going to be a change in the fact that you might now be getting the infringement notice as well, put on your windscreen as well as the one sent through in the mail.
It's an interesting process. We think we've been very efficient and we've responded to the government in the past to make our processes more efficient. And one of those ways to be more efficient is that forget about the various technologies that we've been using in terms of in-ground parking sensors or number plate recognition.
In-ground parking sensors. That's what I was thinking.
That's what you're trying to say.
The whiz-bang thing, whatever it is. In-ground parking sensors. I knew it had a phrase.
I knew what you were saying.
Yeah, that's it. I knew you got it.
Even in the old days when it's chalk on the tyre, and we're still using that for different areas of Dubbo, even with that, the staff moved many years ago to the point where they do that. They've got a device that they then put the details in, and having those details then goes straight through to Revenue New South Wales. So then you get that fine that's issued in the mail. So you get that a few weeks later. What's interesting is that all the new things that we're doing, all the whiz-bang things,
those whiz-bang things, yes.
That's not directly related to that, but they would still be the same process. So you'd still get it in that same process. Yep. So you might come back to your car, you get in your car and drive away, you don't know that you've been fined until you get something in the mail a few weeks later. Now, interesting enough, we got a email from Courtney Houzos, who's the Minister for Finance, Minister for Domestic Manufacturing and Government Procurement, and Minister for Natural Resources. Okay. And that said that in the ticketing process, then we would prefer you as a council, and this went to not just our council, went to 128 councils. They said that we'd prefer that if you do use a ticketless parking system, which is what we do, rather than writing out a ticket and sticking on the windscreen and all the manual processes involved with that, then we would like you to somehow, not mandatory, but it'd be nice if you somehow could let that person know they've been fined in some way, shape or form, have something that you stick under the windscreen, you can have a copy of the fine, whatever it might be, just let them know. And there were three reasons that the Minister wanted this. The first thing is if someone comes back to their car and they don't realise they've been fined, and then later on they receive it in the mail, then it makes it difficult to gather any evidence if that person wants to review that fine.
Okay.
So, for example, I had a flat tyre, my car was broken down, whatever it might be, I was parked in, whatever. Hard to gather the evidence. Second part is there's a reduced impact of a fine to act as a deterrent if you don't know you've been fined. And the third thing is that a driver could receive multiple parking infringements before they got their first notification. So they might have parked in different spots and received these notifications. Then, oh, look at all these ones coming in the mail.
I didn't read the sign. Oh, there it is.
That's right. Yeah. So they have said, can you, if it's okay with you, can you do something that enhances that process so that those things aren't applicable? Now, it's interesting because I've talked to people that have received a fine when they've been driving too fast, or they're out on the road and they've received a fine from mobile speed cameras. And so it might be mobile phone detection as well. But basically, somewhere on the road, you're driving around and you get that in the mail a few weeks later. Well, those same 3 points would apply. If there's any evidence that you want to say to review that, well, how do I know? Because it was weeks ago that it happened. And there's not really a deterrent on that trip because you get it a few weeks later. And also, you can have multiple speeding fines and not know about it until you get those in the mail. Ignore that for the moment. What we've done is we've said, okay, we're understanding of the minister and the process, the direction there. So what we're going to do is we're going to print some slips up, so maybe a little bit bigger than a business card, and basically have something that will go under a windscreen that will say, notification, your vehicle has been detected as being parked illegally. You'll be receiving a fine via the post or Service New South Wales app for a parking violation.
Okay.
So when you come back, you don't know the details of it because the details have already been submitted, but you get it there and you go, oh, damn, I was parked here too long. You look up at the sign, oh, it says 1 hour, I've been here for an hour and a half. Oh, whoops, damn, whatever. And then on you go about your day. So that will change. That will come soon. Again, not a mandatory process from the government, but just a request from the government. And normally when the state government makes a request of council, because we don't control them, they control us, we normally are happy to comply with their, maybe not happy, we will normally comply with their requests.
Well, we said last week, if you don't want one of those, don't park in the wrong spot, or at least stay there for the right amount of time. I reckon it might have been 6 months ago. Would have been the last time we spoke about this. But just very briefly, do you have an update yet in regards to the Dubbo Workplace Hub? This is the building there in Carrington Avenue that the state government was going to centralise all of the departments into. But I don't know if that's necessarily getting to happen now. But there's definitely a decision has been made, as far as I'm aware, that this is going to, though, there are some renovation work that's going to take place here. So
you remember that originally it was going to be a complete knockdown and then a rebuild. So that was complete demolishment of that Carrington Avenue government office block. And that was announced by the coalition government. Then when the new government came in, they reviewed that and they said, no, it's too expensive now to knock it down and rebuild it. We're going to do a refurb. So this is part of that process now, and we've got a few more details on that. So the overall project will be about a $58.6 million project. 656 government employees should be in there. So is it going to be are we centralising some of these departments into this building, or is it, what's actually happening there with that as well? That was the original concept, but again, I can't tell you all the details now. It is a state government project. All I know is that we've got extra information. 142 Brisbane Street, so the government office block that faces Brisbane Street, so that'll have an internal refurb. And so that'll be a change there. But then the one in Carrington Avenue, which was going to be knocked down, they're going to redevelop that existing 3-storey building. And then apparently they're going to add a 3-storey addition to the rear over the existing car park. So there'll be a new facade treatment. So I think there'll be an internal fit out there and some changes. So it's significant. It's still significant. That's right. That's right. Not quite the same level they're going to do in the first place, not knocking it all down and rebuilding it, but still not too bad in terms of the change that'll happen. Absolutely. There. The Aquatic Leisure Centre, we haven't spoken about them for a little while. Getting towards obviously summer's finished and it's been a busy little time period for them. Had a lot of swimming carnivals and all of that going on. Just a quick update for listeners. How did things go over the last month or so since we last spoke? Yeah, certainly improving, and we would hope that to be the case. And we've talked about it before. Belgravia Leisure won the tender, and we've got confidence in them. They were below par, and they admit that as well, and we certainly saw that from the community. But we've had discussions and we've talked about that, and they've certainly been improving. So good. To give you an idea, over the last 5 weeks, they've hosted 28 school swimming carnivals.
It's been busy. I've driven past her a few times. There's been a lot of kids and a lot of cars.
Yeah, that's right. And they judge their performance on a range of things, but there's also a thing called NPS, Net Promoter Score. It's used by a number of organisations. I've been involved with other organisations that have used this.
Okay.
About 150,000 organisations across the world use NPS.
Okay.
And an average score across those 150,000 is a positive score of 32.
Out of?
Maximum you could get is 100.
Okay.
But you can also get...
That's an average score.
Well, you can get negative 100. So the range is negative 100 to positive 100.
Okay.
And across the world, the average is 32.
Right.
Belgravia themselves set a target for themselves of 45. They don't believe 32 is good enough, so they set themselves a target of 45. And so I've looked at some of the scores that they've received going forward, and certainly back in November and December they were low, but then you get to January and February. So, for example, Dubbo is been in January was over 50 and then came back in February to 50. And then Wellington in January was at 0 and now it's up to 50, about 70. So they certainly improved. So that seems to be things
Double
going...
world average.
Well, exactly right. And that seems to be going in the right direction. And even the kiosk, they're working out better things. I don't think they realise just how busy Dubbo does get in particular, but the kiosk there, again, sometimes some school carnivals have been long lineups there, but they're putting some processes in place. They're saying to the schools, for example, can you get the kids to order some of their lunches to be made beforehand so we can have them pre-prepared rather than just turn up an order on the day. So just some little things like that.
What about hot chips? We love our hot chips in Dubbo.
We do love our hot chips in Dubbo, and I think we love our hot chips everywhere, don't we? So, again, lots of things happening there in terms of some of those. But, for example, during February, the kiosk served 16,165 individual transactions, and to back up your point, 2,071 were hot chips. So
I told you we love our chips.
we do.
Especially those swimming carnivals. They love their chips. And boy, they can be time consuming. There's a bit of a wait for the chippies.
Yep, so they're getting better. And to give you an idea of just a comparison now, you picked on hot chips, I'll go and drill down a bit more.
I knew I'd find something there that we love.
So 2,071 hot chips were served in that same period at Dubbo. If you go to Bathurst, 1,853 hot chips.
Yes.
Singleton, 1,777. Parks, Belgravia manages Parks as well, 716. So
we're the biggest consumers of hot chips.
Is that
us?
Is that what we put on the sign?
We win that prize.
So it's getting better. Keep giving feedback to Belgravia themselves.
Okay.
Give feedback to councillors.
So it's heading in the right direction,
It's
basically.
heading in the right direction, absolutely
It's
right.
good to hear. Well, last little one here for us today, Bennelong Bridge. There's a bit of an update here because this is the bridge. This is out near the zoo, I think, out that way.
Yeah, you go out, if you're going out the Oberley Road past the zoo, if you kept going past there, the first major turn on your left is Bennelong Road.
Right.
And there's a bridge. We've done pretty well actually with bridges in our LGA. If I go back to the old Dubbo City Council days and now Dubbo Regional Council, I know there were some councils in terms of the timber bridge replacement program. Some councils had a huge number of bridges to replace and they're expensive, and the state government came in there and came to the party. We've been pretty good in terms of the number of bridges that we've had to replace, and we've gotten through most of them. There's still a couple. Bennelong Bridge is one, and I do know this bridge quite well because I occasionally ride my bike out that way. It's a popular spot to go for cyclists out there. I normally try and ride on dirt with my mountain bike, but if I do go for a road ride, that's a spot that you go. And when you get to Bennelong Bridge, you've got to get off your bike. Well, some people don't, but I get off my bike.
Because this is the bridge, the old bridge had the big gaps between it, didn't it? Yeah.
It's got planks of timber and gaps there between those planks.
Cyclist death spot right there.
Oh, exactly right. And again, look, some people, very clever, they ride across it, but I don't. I get off and walk my bike across. Very brave.
There's another word I'm thinking of.
Now, there's also, if you might remember on this bridge, we talked about it, where there was a weight limit imposed on this bridge temporarily.
Yes.
Because when we were starting the construction of the new bridge, the engineers looked at the old bridge and went, hold on a sec, we shouldn't be having heavy vehicles go across there. But that impacted some of the farmers in the area, so we did do some temporary structural changes there to make sure it could support some of those heavier loads. So that's still in place at the moment. We were hoping to have the new bridge in place by March, so basically by now.
By now, yeah.
If you look out there at the moment, you'll see the piers in the ground for the new bridge, but no deck on top. So you can't
so we're not quite
drive
there
across
yet.
it. No, so the revised time schedule that'll be finished by the end of May.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
So we're a little bit behind schedule there, which is a bit disappointing. But essentially, it's happening, not on track, but it's happening.
It's going to end in a month, beginning with M.
That's right. Any month beginning with M.
That's right.
March, May, November.
November.
So it's happening, but not there yet. So I
Okay.
apologise for that. Not quite on time there, but it'll get there by the end of May, and certainly that'll be a big improvement. And there's a little bit of straightening of the road we've done there as well. So that'll help people as they go through there, not go faster, but just be a more flowing area, so a little bit safer there as well.
It'll be good when it all happens. Well, Matt, it's been a big one again. And it's time, though, for the Limerick of the Week. What do you got for us this week?
Well, I always like to pick the most significant thing, and there's lots of significant things that happen.
Yes.
But I thought I'd pick the most significant thing, the most significant discussion that we had during the week.
Right.
And that, to me, was all about our events that we had here, our bowls and our golf.
Oh,
so
here.
I
Very
try to
impressive.
wrap up that into one limerick. So here we go. The greens and the fairways did call. In Dubbo, we welcome them all. With a roll and a swing from here to Beijing, the Dubbo event team stands tall.
I like how you brought the international flavour in that as well. Well done. You've done very, very well. Now, mate, you've got a big week coming up. You've got the Black Dog course today. You've got the Tour at O-Rock this week as well. So all the very best with that. Congratulations, too, on what looks to be another successful event coming up for you.
Should be fantastic, yep. And keep following that. I'll post some things regularly on that as well.
Good on you, buddy. Until next week, everyone, take care.
Straight from the mayor's mouth with Matthew Dickerson from Dubbo Regional Council.